From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to Coast to Coast AM. Next hour, vampires, demons, and communication with the dead with author Konstantinos. I'm looking forward to this one. Well, here's some important news you need to know. The government warning all of us now and retailers to take urgent, and they mean urgent action to rid your shelves of more than 90 different products, from chili sauce to corned beef hash to some dog food produced at a plant linked to a botulism outbreak. My gosh. Castleberry's Food Company, that's the name of the company. They have closed their suspected plant. Tens of millions of cans that may have been involved, according to the FDA. The company has also hired an outside firm to visit more than 8,500 retailers all around the country in an effort to quickly get recalled products off of store shelves. So far, 4 cases of botulism have been reported, 2 from Indiana, 2 from Texas. All 4 people consumed hot dog chili sauce original, which is a product made by Castleberry's. Botulism is a rare but serious illness caused by consuming foods with the toxin, a nerve toxin that can cause paralysis of the arms, breathing muscles and legs, symptoms such as blurred vision, slurred speech. It'll hit you generally within 18 to 36 hours. Castleberry Food Company. Look on those cans. Drinking just 1 soft drink a day, whether diet or regular, may boost your risk of getting heart disease, according to a new study. That's because they say a soda habit increases the risk of developing a condition called metabolic syndrome, according to the new research, and that in turn boosts the chance of getting both heart disease and diabetes. Michael Vick was ordered by Commissioner Roger Goodell to stay away from the Atlanta Falcons training camp until the Football League reviews the dogfighting charges against him. The NFL said that Vick would still get his preseason pay, and Goodell told the Falcons to withhold any disciplinary action of their own until the league's review completed. Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah says his group possesses an arsenal of rockets that can reach all of Israel, including Tel Aviv. Nasrallah said last year's war between Israel and Hezbollah did not succeed in diminishing his group's military capabilities. Repeating earlier claims, the Hezbollah leader said his group could already have fired at Tel Aviv last summer during the conflict, but had avoided doing so. This is an interesting twist to the Iraqi war. Fed up with being part of a group that cuts off a person's face with piano wire to teach others a lesson, or cooks children, dozens of low-level members of al-Qaeda in Iraq are daring to become informants for the U.S. military in a hostile Baghdad neighborhood. The groundbreaking move in Dora is part of a wider trend that has started in other al-Qaeda hotspots across the country, and in which Sunni insurgent groups and tribal sheiks have stood together with the coalition against the extremist movements. Interesting twist there. In England, servicemen and firefighters are battling to protect the electricity supplies to 500,000 people as the highest floodwaters in memory continue to rise. The government announced an independent inquiry as water levels in the Thames and the Severn exceeded those of the devastating floods of 1947 and were forecast to rise 20 feet higher than normal. More than 10,000 families have been left homeless in the western part of the country and the Thames Valley over the past 4 days. Electricity supplies to 50,000 homes have been cut, 150,000 homes left without water. The floodwaters continue to increase in the United Kingdom. In Deerfield, Florida, a 36-year-old diver was killed after lightning struck his oxygen tank. He and his friends were diving near a boat in the Deerfield Beach. When he surfaced, lightning struck his tank. He was pronounced dead on his way to the hospital. Now, Richard C. Hoagland has sent me an email, and then he pointed out a story that I knew about because this happened in St. Louis over the weekend. And he said, George, I think something's happening because of your Ouija board show, the show that we're going to do on Wednesday. And you know what? Richard might be right. And I want to tell you some of the things that have been happening. There's no question in my mind that, again, the Ouija board is a toy, and it's the individual that lets in any of these spirits, these bad spirits. But something is happening to people I know and people who have been associated with this show very recently. And I want to just go through this very quickly for you. First of all, over the weekend, hundreds of people were trapped inside the Gateway Arch. That's the big arch in St. Louis. I know that well. I've been up it before. The arch goes 630 feet up in the air. It's huge. Some people were stuck in there for 3 hours with an electrical failure. And it's weird that it would happen in St. Louis, my hometown there. My daughter calls me this morning. Her dishwasher blows up. Flood in her kitchen. Accidents reported, and Archbishop James Long, who was on the program last week, who warned about the Ouija board show, his family has been involved in a critical car accident, and he's going to come on the program briefly Wednesday to talk a little bit more about that. I am beginning to think twice about this program, which is still scheduled, and we will still go on with it, but I've got to tell you, I am really thinking twice that friends and people I know are getting affected, and now I'm also concerned about you. If you go up to the coasttocoastam.com website, take a look at the listener's email photograph, an unbelievable picture of what could very well be an angel on the water. It's shot by a fellow by the name of Ron. We won't give out his last name, but go take a look at that picture. And also, well, the time has come. Our dear friend Mark Zachary recently co-wrote and directed an upcoming Star Trek New Voyages episode called World Enough and Time, starring Star Trek alum George Takei. And both of them are next on Coast to Coast AM. And also, we'll take your phone calls with both of them later on this hour. This will be a real treat for you. And then I've got a little surprise, a promise I made on the air a few months ago to an individual. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, here's a real treat for those of you who are Star Trek fans, and of course you listen to Coast on a regular basis. Of course, you know Mark Zachary. He's been on the program before. He's got more than 100 dramatic television credits to his name, including episodes of Star Trek, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Babylon 5, of course, Twilight Zone, Sliders. Mark has served on staff of 4 series, which include Sliders, Lazarus Man, Beyond Reality, Friday the 13th, the series. Beyond this, he's written 7 pilots, and Mark has been a commentator for 3 years on NPR's Morning Edition. He's also the author of the best-selling The Twilight Zone Companion, and has written for virtually every major studio and network, and his work has been nominated for several awards. Mark Zachary. Hey, Mark, how are you?
Very well, George.
Okay, and we've got a great surprise here. George Takei, best known for his portrayal of Mr. Sulu in the acclaimed television film series Star Trek, has more than 30 feature films and hundreds of television guest starring roles to his credit, currently appearing as a recurring character on NBC's TV Heroes. We'll talk with him a little bit about that. In that, he's the father of a time traveler. George's acting career has spanned 5 decades, and he's grateful for his association with Star Trek TV's sci-fi show and the character he portrays. Originally the helmsman of the starship USS Enterprise, Mr. Sulu was promoted to captain of the USS Excelsior in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, released in 1991. George reprised his Captain Sulu role in a Star Trek Voyager episode titled Flashback. That was in 96. And the great part about all of this, in addition to his acting career, he gives back. He's been involved in a lot of civic affairs. George Takei. Hey, George, how are you?
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Great first name,
My whole
George.
galactic biography.
I love it. Okay, Mark, we've got you here in George. You got to tell me, how did this relationship develop to do this new Star Trek episode?
Well, I've wanted to work with George Takei for a very long time, ever since I interviewed him when I was writing The Twilight Zone Companion, because he was on one of the great classic episodes of The Twilight Zone called The Encounter. And I learned about these fans who were making their own Star Trek episodes, and the quality of them was just staggering. The effects were great, the costumes were great, the writing was very fun, very entertaining. And 30 years ago, a friend of mine came up with a Sulu story for a Star Trek show that never got made, a series called Star Trek Phase 2. And coincidentally, in that episode, Sulu ended up aging 30 years and having a family on an alien planet that he got marooned on. And it seemed the perfect time now to do this great episode.
George, I've seen a portion of the DVD. Once again, you've done a great job.
Oh, you've seen it already.
Yes, I have.
Well, this, too, is another totally undreamed of aspect of this incredible phenomenon called the Star Trek fan following. This new Star Trek New Voyages series is really a work of passion. The people who discovered Star Trek back in 1966, when they were in high school or college, went on to pursue their various independent careers and became very successful. But nevertheless, 40 years later now, there's still Star Trek fans. And when the last of the Star Trek spin-off series went off the air, Star Trek Enterprise, they didn't want to go cold turkey. So they said, well, let's do our own Star Trek series. Like, when I was a kid, we used to put on backyard plays.
Yeah.
But this time, their friends are internet friends. This 21st century device that they have, and so they marshaled all their friends from Europe, certainly all over North America, Latin America, Australia, and they started doing a TV series based on Star Trek. They got permission from CBS, and the amazing thing is that they're all independently successful in each their own careers. For example, the young actor that plays Sulu as a young man is a hotshot Washington, D.C. attorney. The actor that plays Dr. McCoy is, in fact, a real doctor in Portland, Oregon. And the spearhead of the whole project, James Cawley, is a very successful Elvis impersonator.
I love it. George, when you first got the original part of Mr. Sulu in the original television series, how did that all come about? Tell me about the audition, how you knew it was happening. This is something I think everyone would love to know.
Well, it wasn't anything too unusual. My agent called and said he had an interview for me at Desilu Studios. A man named Gene Roddenberry, who I didn't know from Adam. I went to the interview, and you're a little nervous when you're going into an interview. I mispronounced his name. I called him Mr. Rosenberry, and he, in turn, also made a mistake in pronouncing my name. He called me George Takei, and I told him, well, that's not the way you pronounce my name, but I have no objections to that pronunciation of my name, because there is a legitimate Japanese word that's pronounced Takai, and it translates into English as expensive. But my name is pronounced Takei, and no producer likes to call an actor expensive. So he said, oh, my goodness, yes, you are Takei. And I told him, well, Takei doesn't mean cheap either. And that was how this whole thing began for me.
Did you expect the series to run as long as it did, and also to have the kind of fan base that it developed?
Well, I could tell you that because I fancy myself a visionary, I expected it to go on, and here in the 7th year of the 21st century, I'd still be talking to you about Star Trek. No, I did not. As a matter of fact, the series was very low rated, all 3 seasons that we were on, and finally, despite the fact that at the beginning of each episode we announced that we were on a 5-year mission, our 5-year mission was cut short in 3, and we were canceled then. So no, I had no idea that we would be enjoying this kind of incredible, amazing longevity.
Mark, you've been a fan of Star Trek since you were a kid, haven't you?
That's right, George. I was very lucky. When I was a child, I was given a Christmas present of a visit to the Star Trek set, so I actually got to see the last original episode of Star Trek being shot. It was very funny because at that point, someone on the set murmured last show of the season, and Majel Barrett said last show ever. And ironically, she's in the Star Trek New Voyages episode that I just directed and co-wrote, and she reprises the role of the computer voice. So I think we've come full circle.
George, you're also doing Heroes for NBC. Tell me a little bit about that. You know what's also fascinating, and you got to tell me about this. The character that you're playing, don't you have a license plate number that was the same as the Starship Enterprise's registration number?
Well, now this too is part of this incredible Star Trek fandom. I'm doing a totally different TV series, absolutely unrelated to Star Trek. But the prop man happens to be a passionate Star Trek fan, and that was his idea to give my limousine the license plate NCC 1701. And when Star Trek fans saw that, they let out a collective national whoop.
George and Mark, we're going to keep you for phone calls in just a second here, up until the top of the hour. We're also going to talk a little bit about a contest associated with this new Star Trek episode and a little bit more about this. I want you to listen to this clip. About a month and a half ago or so, an individual called my program. He suffers from epilepsy, but his lifelong dream has been to do radio. As a matter of fact, he's doing an internet radio show now. His name is Michael Johnson. I want you to just hear this clip when he called in, because he's going to take the next couple minutes to chat with both of you.
Yeah, this is Mike from South Carolina.
Hey, Mike, what's up?
Oh, I got to tell you, I'm a new listener, but I just love your show.
How'd you find us, Mike?
I have a friend of mine in Oklahoma that told me about you.
That's good. Word of mouth. I like that.
Yes, well, I used to be in radio also, but I am no longer on-air reliable, so...
You sound like you used to be in radio, though.
Excuse me?
Give me a little coast-to-coast line or something.
You're listening to Coast to Coast with George Norrie, AM.
Not bad, Mike.
But I want to let you know I do love your show. I'm no longer able to broadcast, but I am trying this internet broadcasting.
Good for you. Now, let me put you on hold.
Yes, sir.
And I'll tell you what we're going to do for a segment one day. I'm going to have my producer, Tom, talk to you, and this is what we're going to do. I'm going to let you co-host a segment with me. You want to do that?
Oh, I would love it.
And, Michael, as you know, I keep my promises, so we've got a few minutes here for you with Mark Zachary and George Takei. Have at 'em.
Hello, George, and Mike. Mark, excuse me.
Glad
Good
to
evening.
hear you.
And first off, I wanted to make a correction here. When I gave this shout-out, I messed it up, so I want to do it real quick. You're listening to Coast AM with George Norrie.
That's all right.
There. I have a question for George, please.
Uh-huh.
Which George? There are two of us here.
Well, Mr. Sulu. There we go.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies of all time is The Green Berets.
Ah, yes.
And I have to ask you, and also I have a listener on my radio station on the internet that said you have to ask. So, what was it like working with John Wayne?
The great John Wayne. Well, we all know what John Wayne is like on screen. Well, he's one of those remarkable people who's exactly the same off screen as he is on. That was kind of surprising to me, because I'd found that many of these iconic actors are quite different from the iconic images that they project. But John Wayne is, you get what you see. He's a big guy. He's a decent guy. He's a very strong and commanding guy. He has great leadership abilities. He directed the film, as well as in many ways he wrote it too. We had a script, but he was pretty much making up the lines for us as we went along. And he was, I enjoyed working with him very much.
So did he come up with the line, "I hate cons"?
Well, you know, I did that about 40 years ago, so I my memory's not the freshest. Was that a line in the movie?
Yes, it was.
I see.
You were Captain Nim, and you...
That's right.
You actually yelled, "I hate cons." And
well, I really, frankly, I can't say I remember what the
long
source
time
of that
ago
line was.
yes, and I just need to say, okay, I'm a Star Trek fan from way back.
Well, thank
I
you.
remember
You've been
being
trekking with us for a long time.
Yes.
Hey, Michael, thank you. We're hitting the break, but there's your moment, and hope you had fun.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's Michael John. He's disabled. He's got epilepsy. He called in once, and this is his dream to do a little segment. And there you go. I'll be back in a moment with George Takei and Mark Zachary as we talk more about their new Star Trek episode. It's exciting stuff. It's Star Trek New Voyages, World Enough and Time. And yes, we're going to open up the phone lines, give you a chance to talk with them now as well. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And this is your opportunity now. We'll open up the phone lines with our two special guests tonight, Star Trek's George Takei and Mark Zachary. We're all next on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to your phone calls on Coast to Coast. Mark Zachary and George Takei, of course. George, do you remember when the shuttle, the Enterprise, was commissioned? I think you were all down there in Virginia, weren't you?
Not Virginia, right here in California, at Edwards Air Force Base. And yeah, I must say that was a heady experience. I mean, we're actors that fictionally portrayed life out in space. But because of that, we were able to participate in a genuine historic event, the rollout of the first space shuttle called the Enterprise.
Must have been thrilling.
It was an absolutely unforgettable experience. Barry Goldwater, Senator Barry Goldwater was the keynote speaker, and he gave a stirring speech. And then the Air Force band started to play a tune, and that was the theme from Star Trek. And as we heard that music, this great craft came rolling out of the hangar. It was a heart-stopping moment.
Mark, this is one of your first directing jobs. Did you have a good time?
Oh, it was terrific. Well, first, it was just so fun getting to work with an actor of George's caliber. It was really like starting your driving lessons by driving a Rolls Royce around the block.
Well, thank you.
I couldn't have done better. And a lot of
I've never been called a Rolls Royce yet.
Well, I think when people see the episode, George, they're going to start saying that around the country because your performance is just phenomenal. I'm so honored and pleased that we were able to pull this off.
Now, what's the venue, Mark? Internet, widescreen? How are you going to show it?
Well, we're actually going to have an amazing world-shaking event. We're on August 27th. We're going to be premiering the episode. We're going to have a red carpet premiere at the Beverly Hills Fine Arts Theater with a VIP crowd. George will pull up in a limo. He'll walk the red carpet. We'll go in. We'll have panels. And people can go online. They can register online on the Star Trek New Voyages website, even now. And they'll be able to see real-time as it's happening, the event, and be able to watch the entire episode just like the audience in the theater. So literally it will be a world premiere that the entire world can watch. And I think this may be the first time that's been done.
That's exciting. Star
Isn't
Trek.
That amazing? I mean, that's really taking advantage of 21st century technology.
It is.
It's like a beaming people aboard, George, isn't it?
Well, not quite yet.
Getting close.
Believe me, I pray for the early invention of that.
Let's take some phone calls.
I just got off a plane late last night from Philadelphia, and the pain and headache and the hassle involved. I pray for the early invention of the transport.
You were probably on that scene. In the film, they just transported us all over the place. Let's go to the phones. Wild card line, you're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hello, George. This is for George, not Mark.
Okay.
I think personal Mark, but Mr. Takei, I'm not mocking you or anything, but that's your normal speaking voice.
What do you mean? You want me to speak
it just sounds like you have a natural inflection, but I'm not. I'm just wondering. That's how you talk to your friends and everything.
That's the way I talk to Mark, and that's the way I talk to I'm talking to you like this.
We should all be that lucky, George. People ask me that when they meet me out broadcasting. Sometimes my inflections are a little more deliberate, but by and large, I sound the way I am, just like you do.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, we communicate via our voice, and we actors get vocal training, and we learn how to articulate. So I guess it becomes a part of the way we are.
East of the Rockies, you're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hello?
Yes, take it away.
George Takei.
Pronounced Takei.
Do you remember when you were in Denver a few years back at one of the Star Trek conventions, a gentleman will ask you about the time that you got caught jogging in Portland, Maine without a jogging permit?
Yes, I do.
You have to have a jogging permit in Portland?
Well, it was, I'm a very trusting and gullible guy, and Star Trek fans know that I am a daily habitual jogger, and they put two and two together, and they got one of their policeman friends, and as I was jogging Sunday morning, and there was no one around, I got picked up for jogging without a Portland, Maine jogging license.
I love it. They were pulling your leg.
Oh, I'm telling you. And I was, getting infuriated. I was getting outraged until I saw some video cameras there off in the background photographing the whole thing.
I love it. What's home for you, George? Where were you born?
L.A. I'm a native Angelino.
Oh, you are? Okay. First-time caller, you are on the air with us.
Wow, I can't believe I'm on.
You're on with George and Mark.
Yeah, my question is for Mr. Takei. What would you like to see for the next Star Trek movie that they're talking about making? Would you like to see a continual of the original series or a fresh start? With the new Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and Mr. Sulu and...
Well, what I understand is that it is going to be the original characters, Kirk and Spock and so forth, but it is a prequel. So, we're a little bit younger than you saw us back in 1966. And, in fact, the actors are 40 years older, so they just absolutely have to cast younger actors who... look like us. I understand that J.J. Abrams, the director, is calling a press conference this Thursday, and so do watch for that. He will be making some major casting announcements then.
It's exciting. George, would you do another movie with the remaining original cast if they put one together?
Oh, I would love to. I love my character, Sulu, but, I really have had my dream come true already with World Enough in Time. Mark found this story, and he got together with the original writer who put that story together, Michael Reeve, and created my dream role. Sulu ages 30 years, and the character developments, the human relationship is very full and touching, and the kind of dimension to the characters is so rich. I couldn't ask for another role as Sulu better than this one.
And Mark, you shot this in high definition, did you not?
Yeah, because the previous episodes of Star Trek New Voyages, they'd done 3 episodes before I came aboard, had been shot in mini DV. But my goal was to make it the equivalent, absolutely at the highest level of production, equivalent to a network show. So we shot high def, A&B camera. We have 700 effects shots. I brought a whole bunch of Oscar and Emmy winners aboard to do in every level of cast and crew, and many of my friends who work on the Star Wars films and Battlestar Galactica and so forth. And Michael Reeves and myself, Michael's an Emmy winner, we both wrote for Star Trek The Next Generation. Our goal was to write it exactly as if we were writing for a network show, and we didn't step down from that at all, and I think people will be really blown away when they see it. When we've been screening it for people, they're in tears at the end. They're so moved.
Mark, I know you have a contest going for Star Trek New Voyages on the website, and people can fill that out to get a trip there. That's exciting. On your next film, what you've got to do on this program is get a coast-to-coast listener a role in the movie.
That's the deal.
Even if it's a quick thing.
Absolutely, George, we'll definitely do that. But you mentioned the contest, and we're announcing it for the first time anywhere in the world on Coast to Coast, because I have such fondness for you and your show, and I really wanted to roll it out on Coast to Coast. And what we're doing is people can go on to StarTrekNewVoyages.com, or they can also mail in for the contest if they're not online. And the lucky winner, so anyone in the U.S. can enter if they're 18 or older, and they'll be flown to the premiere August 27th. They'll get to be at the VIP premiere and have dinner with me and George Takei and others of the cast and crew, and it'll be the full Hollywood experience, seeing World Enough in Time.
Cool. Now, 27th or 23rd?
It's August 27th. Sorry if if I said the 23rd. It's August
27th. Is it? I thought it was the 23rd.
Yeah, I thought it was the 23rd too, Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry. It is I'm sorry, George. Both Georges are correct. It's August 23rd.
I'm always watching out for you, Zachary.
Thank you. I was speaking metrically, and so it's August 23rd, and 1 month from today, and it'll be quite an experience. And so they just have to go on to StarTrekNewVoyages.com and register, and off we go.
George, would you take a trip to the moon or somewhere if they were offering that?
You know, I really would like to. And certainly a U.S. senator, a former astronaut, did it in his 80s.
Yes,
so
he did.
If he can do it, I know I can.
That'd be exciting. Let's go to our East of the Rockies line. You're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi there.
Hi, my name is Barbara.
Hey, Barbara, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Wonderful spot. Go ahead.
I have a little story to tell you about Star Wars and Star Trek.
Uh-huh.
My husband used to be, he's passed away now, but he used to be a film driver. And he used to deliver the film all through New Jersey.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And he had taken Star Wars or Star Trek, I think it was Star Wars, I know it was Star Wars. He took Star Wars out to a drive-in theater. And all of a sudden, we delivered it and came back, and we got a call the next day from the studios. Where was the film, and where did he take it, and what time was this, and the whole bit. And they came down to talk to him, and the FBI was there.
Oh, my.
Somebody had stolen it out of the drive-in theater, and what they were doing at that time, I'm going way, way back, they were making copies of it.
Pirates, yeah.
And then after that, what they were doing is they were melting the reels down to silver and selling it. So when Star Trek came out, they had the FBI standing right there while he loaded his truck up to deliver. And we were under FBI for a while.
That's a great story, Barbara. All right, thank you. Let's move to our wild card line. You're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, is that me?
Yes, sir. If you are who you are, it is you.
Okay, let me take off. George, it's Star Trek Steve in L.A.
Hi.
Hi, George Takei and George Norrie. What a nice time to get through. George, I don't know if you wouldn't know me by name, Steve Hershon, but I worked on all the shows that Rusty Meek did, and I did Silent Bits. I was in the one Trouble with Tribbles. I bring Stanley Adams in.
Oh, did you?
At the end of the show for the hearing, and just several things. So I just wanted to say hi. And
well, good to hear your voice.
Oh, yeah, I can't believe it.
Why do you call yourself Star Trek Steve?
Well, because I've been in 10 episodes.
He's got a Star Trek connection.
He's been in almost episodes as many as you have, George.
Well, he wears it with pride, I can see.
Well, if you remember the episode Obsession with Stephen Brooks, sure, I materialized on the planet looking for that invisible cloud.
Yep.
Yeah, and I died solo on the screen. It'd be great to see you again someday.
I love it. How did they get the name Sulu?
Sulu. Well, Gene Roddenberry's vision of the show was to have that diversity visibly depicted. His philosophy was that the Starship Enterprise was a metaphor for Starship Earth, and the strength of our starships lay in its diversity coming together. And so my character was supposed to represent all of Asia. Uhura represented all of Africa, and so forth. But Asian names are nationally specific. Like Tanaka is Japanese, Wong is Chinese, Kim is Korean, and he wanted a name that suggested all of Asia. And it was a real dilemma for him, but he was staring at the map of Asia and trying to figure it out. And then it dawned on him. Here's this sea in the south, near the South China Sea, called the Sulu Sea. And he thought, the waters of the sea touch all shores.
What a genius.
And so that's how the name Sulu came about.
What a genius. West of the Rockies, your turn. Hi there.
Hello, George and Mark. Hello.
Hi.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
Great. I always seem to get in right around the moon landing anniversary, give or take a couple of days. This is Bill and Phelan. George, I know you. You know me. Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
Used to work with Paula Chris.
Yes.
How you doing?
Good.
I'm talking to George Takei, so
yes.
George knows me too.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, years ago, I had been at Santa Monica College, and you had come there to speak. and you were on the Rapid Transit District or something. You had something to do with the Rapid Transit. And I remember a really interesting story that you told about how you were on the Star Trek animated cartoon series at the time, and because your voice was featured on the animated, your political opponent wanted equal time, like a fairness doctrine type thing. Do you remember that?
I sure do. Actually, I was running for city council at that time. It was before I served as Mayor Bradley's appointee on the Southern California Rapid Transit District Board. And once I declared my candidacy, the local station that was running the reruns of Star Trek unfortunately ran an episode of Star Trek in which I was on for 17 minutes. And all the other candidates running for that same office claimed equal time. It's a Federal Communications Commission ruling, but it is not equal time, because based on the 17 minutes I had, mouthing lines that were written by writers and playing a character created by Gene Roddenberry, all these other candidates were able to get 17 minutes as themselves, John Jones, and talk on issues. My name is John Jones, this is the way I feel about taxation, or my name is Mary Smith, and this is the way I feel about education. And so the station pulled all the episodes that I was in, and at the same time also the animated series were running, cartoon pictures, with my voice speaking. And they had to black that out, too, only in Southern California where I was running. It was really a stupid ruling that still exists today, and I think it's really got to be changed, because in no way can it be justified as equal time.
George, in your entire career, what one episode, what one occurrence has stayed in your mind, really, all your career?
You mean in terms of the challenge and the richness? And
what's affected you the most?
Well, certainly in the Star Trek series, it's this one, World Enough in Time. But in terms of a really very fulfilling role, it's a role that I did in New York on stage, A Year of the Dragon, which we later taped for the Theater in America series on PBS.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, to me, the most fulfilling role that I've ever had.
Take a few more calls, and that'll be it for the night. Wildcard line, you're up. Hi there.
Hey there, George, and Mark. How you doing tonight?
Good. Go ahead.
Eric, I'm calling from I-5 in California, driving a truck. And I just wanted to say to Mr. Decay, there is absolutely nothing wrong with your voice. Your voice
I hope not.
Your voice was my favorite voice on Star Trek. I enjoyed Star Trek.
Return the compliment. I think you've got good taste.
You did have that very distinctive approach.
Well, I must say that writing for George, Michael Reeves and I both found that writing for George as Mr. Sulu in World Enough in Time, it was like writing from a wonderfully tuned musical instrument. We just knew that he'd be able to deliver the lines gorgeously, and he succeeded beyond our wildest expectations.
Well, I'm really very flattered that coming from you, Mark.
Yeah. Thank you, George.
George, does anybody stay in touch with anybody else anymore? Shatner and Leonard and
well,
we've
as a
lost
matter
one.
of fact, I just came from a Star Trek convention in Philadelphia, and Leonard was there, and Bill was there as well, and I had a nice conversation with Leonard. And the weekend before that, I was given an award in San Francisco, and Leonard was nice enough to fly in and present me with the award.
Well, that's great.
Leonard's a very good friend.
I run into Walter Koenig out here in L.A. all the time, and of course we lost James Doohan, and his ashes went up there.
Well, they're both
and back down again.
Very good friends. Or Jimmy was a very dear friend. I used to call him my favorite drinking buddy. And Walter I talk to on the phone quite regularly.
George, I want to thank you for being on the program. You're invited back, my friend, anytime. And you too as well, Mark Zicree. You know that.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mark. And again, their website linked up at coasttocoastam.com, Star Trek New Voyages.com. And you can register for the contest there and have some fun. And maybe you'll be fortunate enough to be invited to the August 23rd premiere and go have a great time. You really enjoy it. And two delightful individuals. Good. In a moment, paranormal researcher and expert on the occult, Konstantinos, joins us. We will explore, of course, vampires, the different types, the immortal blood drinkers, the mortal blood drinkers, and psychic vampires, the dead, and demons, and much more on Coast to Coast AM. Konstantinos is an occult writer. He's an expert consultant on occult topics, author of Vampires, the Occult Truth, Nocturnal Witchcraft, many more, The Popular Speak with the Dead, 7 Methods for Spirit Communication. A noted expert in white noise and psychic phenomenon. He has been featured in the New York Post, on the Ricky Lake Show, CNBC's After Hours, MTV's The Big Urban Myth Show, Sci-Fi Channel's Declassifying Evil, and the Discovery Channel's documentary Twisted History. Konstantinos is currently working on Demons, the Occult Truth, which will explore realities of entities and the ways they have interacted with humankind throughout history. And is this right, Konstantinos? Were you on about 11 years ago on the program?
Yeah, I was on with Art Bell, August 96.
God, long time ago. I saw your picture today. I thought, my gosh, you look like Chris Angel, an uncanny resemblance. Did you know that?
Well, we're both Greek and we're both from Long Island, so that'll do it, I guess.
Well, welcome to the program. I'm looking forward to this today, especially with some of the things we're going to be doing this week. I might take some of your advice. How did you get involved with all of this, the occult?
That would actually be my Greek grandmother.
Really?
Yeah. When I was young, she would babysit me and my sister, and she would tell us stories about the old country. And while my sister would fall asleep, I would sort of be fascinated and stay up all night listening. She would tell us about the dead knocking on your door, asking for food, and curses and other types of spells that people did there.
What, did it become an obsession as you got older to study this?
Well, when I was young and I would listen to the stories, it always sounded like there was a common thread, like there was something that made all those different kinds of stories seem related to each other. So I gradually became interested in finding out what that common thread was, and that's when I discovered the word, the occult, which just basically means the hidden.
Were you able to study from anybody, or did you have to basically, once you got through the grandmother moment, go out and study yourself?
Yeah, it was a lot of self-study, a lot of tracking down old books, and also coming across people at the most unlikely moments, bits of synchronicity, if you will. They just seem to come into your life when you need them. It's kind of interesting how that works out.
You know, and I've noticed in your work, Konstantinos, you've touched on a lot of really the pluses and minuses of the occult and what's out there, like vampires, like speaking with the dead, summoning up spirits. All of them, I would guess, are pretty dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
Anything could be dangerous, I guess, if you don't know what you're doing. It's a raw, untapped energy form for most people, and when they first step into that sphere of being, sometimes the experiences could get out of hand. That's why I try to prepare people. But it's like that with anything, whether it's paranormal or normal. You have to prepare and go in aware of all the ramifications of your actions.
Are there a lot of occultists like yourself out there that really understand what they're doing?
I mean, there are a lot of people who dabble, and that could get dangerous kind of fast, right? I mean, if you go into it not really prepared for the commitment and the study required, that gets kind of dangerous. I see a lot of dabblers, people who just want a quick fix, something that'll work fast to solve their problems. And sometimes they're not ready for the forces that come back.
Are there some people out there that dabble with this because they themselves might be evil? Maybe they want to put hexes and spells on people. I mean, they're out to hurt people?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can use anything for good or evil, really. And one of the most base emotions, I guess, is anger. If people are ticked off, they will look for the easiest way. Sometimes in some states, that's walking into a store where you can get a gun without waiting a few days. And in the case of the occult, people think that they could cast spells and destroy their enemies. But it's interesting how the universe sort of takes care of itself there. If you go into it with such negativity in mind, usually those forces end up coming back to haunt you.
Tenfold sometimes, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have you give us some examples a little bit later on. In this country specifically, are there a number of people or groups that are beginning to join together? We've got the one end, people who are ultra religious. Are there people who dabble in the occult and it's almost a religion for them?
Sure. Some people approach it purely on religious grounds, like Wiccans, for example. For them, the occult and magic are intertwined with religion 100%. But there are groups now, I mean, the Internet makes it easier to reach out and find like-minded individuals. It's things that used to be extremely obscure can now amass relatively large numbers of people in a short period of time using something like a website or a forum. You can call together even 10 or 15 people and end up with something kind of impressive.
Lots of things we'll be doing on Wednesday, and I'm going to get your advice later in this program because I'm beginning to change my mind somewhat. You have done a lot of work in summoning up spirits. We'll talk about that, but let's spend a little time here, if we can, Konstantinos, about the vampires. You basically have broken down vampirism three different ways: immortal blood drinkers, mortal blood drinkers, and psychic vampires. Let's go through all three of them, first of all.
Sure.
The immortal blood drinkers, what are they? Who are they?
Well, the immortal blood drinkers, those are the ones that you end up seeing in most movies. They're the vampires of folklore, the risen dead who feast on the blood of the living at night to sustain their undead existence. They're the ones that the evidence sort of dies down a few hundred years ago, and they're the ones that most likely were believed in because of a misunderstanding of the death process. And we could talk more about that in a bit. The mortal blood drinkers are the sort of, I guess, people who feel the need to drink blood today. They normally dress like vampires and participate in like a lifestyle. It becomes a social, sometimes sexual act. And they're for the most part, harmless. I mean, they have consensual adults who donate their blood for those kinds of relationships. And the psychic vampires are the ones that probably have the most basis in occult fact. They're the ones who feel the need, either intentionally or unintentionally, to drain life force or energy from other living people. And they feel that it makes them more powerful than others sometimes. Sometimes they just really have the need because of a energy lacking that they feel.
Would that include some people who probably don't even know they're doing this?
Yeah, those are the ones I call the unintentional psychic vampires. People who are ill sometimes, especially if, let's say, an older person is ill and they're in a house with someone who's much younger and vibrant. Just through natural osmosis, energy flows that way in the universe.
Now, the immortal blood drinkers, are they real, or is it all Hollywood? Is it all the old?
Yeah, it seems to be mostly Hollywood. From what I found, all the evidence just, it dies down, like I said. It seems that when people would dig up corpses a long time ago because an outbreak of a disease would hit a village, they would find this bloated body with what seemed to be fresh blood coming out of its mouth and freshly growing nails and growing hair. And what was really happening was the skin would be curling back to reveal things like longer teeth and longer nails. And when they drove a stake in these things, they would groan, they would emit blood. But it was really a physiological process.
Okay. Vlad the Impaler, though real, wasn't a vampire.
No, although there's the fun folklore, fun, I guess, if you like vampires, that he would sometimes dip bread into blood of his victims or just drink it straight from a cup. I mean, he was ruling at a time where keeping order required extreme measures, and his favorite method of punishment was impalement. And it is true that a lot of people saw him as a hero because he kept things in order. I mean, he would leave coins at a well and hide in the bushes with his men to see if anyone would take them, and no one would because they were too afraid of being impaled.
The old finders keepers didn't hold up with him, did it?
Yeah, no.
I guess you could consider him then a mortal blood drinker, right?
You could. I mean, if the stories are true, it's hard to say. Some things get better with retelling, and just because because of those types of associations that he had in that area. Was he involved in supernatural forces? Was he larger than life? That kind of stuff intrigued Bram Stoker, and that's why he chose him as his fictional vampire. So it's not, certain whether or not he actually did do the drinking. But.
So you're pretty sure then that we don't have some 1,000-year-old vampires roaming this planet right now?
I think by now they would have sought me out, right?
Yeah, they would have. In one way or another, they would have come after you.
Yeah, that's true.
The mortal blood drinkers, are these the people, Konstantinos, who go to the dentist and get, those vampire teeth capped on their teeth?
Oh, sure. Some of them do. They don't really work too well for quote-unquote feeding, some of those things. They actually cause a lot of pain and discomfort. So even the ones with the best fangs usually end up drawing the blood out with something like a normal syringe and drinking it out of a glass, or making little slits with a razor or a sharp lancet or something like that. But they do it as living part of the magnetic lifestyle. They'll put in contacts to make their eyes look like giant black spheres, and they're all enwrapped in the mystique too. And I guess that's okay. People do all sorts of things to express themselves. But what's interesting is most of the immortal blood drinkers, they do start to dress that way and act that way after they've discovered Anne Rice or some other vampire first. I've yet to really come across one I can prove from a very young age started wearing a cape at, let's say, 3 or 4 and, tried to fly out the window or something.
Well, and, we hear all kinds of stories crossing this desk, and I have not heard one of a person committing vampirism on someone, attacking someone, trying to suck their blood out of them. I'm sure it happens, but I haven't heard many cases.
Yeah, every once in a while you hear one. There was a few years ago, there was a woman found wandering the street, and she had been kidnapped, and it turns out a guy was holding her and draining her blood. But he never really even did that before. He was just performing all sorts of sexual perversions.
Yeah, he was just a wacko. Yeah.
And there are, of course, vampire-inspired murders that happen every once in a great while. But usually you'll find that there are disturbed people committing those acts, right? There are people who go into a school with a gun. I suppose that's a different kind of disturbed act too. So it's best to look for those kinds of warning signs before things like that happen.
As a researcher, have you ever witnessed any of these events, any of these gatherings?
Gatherings, yes. Violence, I've been lucky enough to not see. But mostly. I've been invited to events. There's, for example, the Court of Lazarus in New York, where they do a very controlled form of blood drinking. They have their own secret little rituals that occur behind the scenes. And I guess if it's all consenting adults and they know what they're getting into, that's fine. But let's face it, drinking blood is probably the least safe.
I wouldn't say it's very, very healthy to do that.
Yeah.
Are there some people, some individuals, names that would boggle our minds if we knew who they were? Anybody of notoriety?
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that any super...
So the elitists of this world are not playing vampires?
Yeah, no, there isn't some, secret cabal of former presidents or something. Not that I know of. That'd make a great Dan Brown album, I'm sure.
We could call a movie Eyes Wide Shut or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, and then the psychic vampires, of course, and as you mentioned, they are people who literally draw energy from people, other people who don't know they're doing this. But how does it happen? Why does it happen?
Well, in part, like I mentioned osmosis before, if someone does have less energy, the universe loves equilibrium. You see it in all sorts of systems. It just wants everything to be in one level playing ground. So if you have something putting off a lot of energy and something without a lot of energy, it's just going to flow that way, the path of least resistance. Now, if it happens often enough and the person feels better often enough, they just sort of subconsciously learn how to do it. It's like biofeedback. Like you can teach yourself how to make your hand get warmer or colder or something.
And they begin to enjoy it, don't they?
Without even knowing why. They just will feel better around a certain person, and they'll always want to be around them. And likewise, certain people always end up feeling uncomfortable around a certain person.
Well, that's true. We've all been to a party or an event or somewhere where you know who the psychic vampire in the room is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not always just boredom. Sometimes there might be an occult cause.
Were they born this way, you think? As children, it was the same, or did it develop later on in their lives?
The unintentional ones, I think, definitely develop. I think something occurs, some underlying illness. I've seen it several times. I still hear about it in letters from readers. Something just comes over that person, some kind of illness, and they really just can't help it. It's something that makes them feel better. And on a mild level, it's actually not that bad. Like if the person were around a lot of really energetic individuals and they started to feel a little better, who knows? I mean, it could actually have a good result. What's dangerous is when someone decides to practice that as their form of personal empowerment, because then it does become a malicious act, and it could really lead to energetic people becoming not so energetic and actually rather ill.
Have you ever been summoned by police and they say, hey, we need your help here, Konstantinos? This is a bizarre case here.
No, I haven't done any sort of high-profile police case or anything like that. Anything I might have done was strictly off the record.
You won't tell us, will you?
Yeah, strictly off the record.
You know, a dentist who gives someone one of these fang caps, I mean, why did they do this? Don't they, with their own profession, want to say, I'm not going to do this to you? I mean, I guess they have them sign releases and things, huh?
Well, I mean, it's cosmetic. It's someone's choice, I suppose, right? I mean, you can get caps. You can get caps to make yourself look like a horse, I suppose, if you want.
If you want to.
Yeah. And, of course, if a dentist gets good at that and builds up notoriety for it, it's a way to differentiate and get a different class of clientele, I suppose.
Are there some dentists who basically are specialists at vampire caps?
A true dentist that's a specialist. I know there are ones that are considered specialists, but they still also do fillings and things like that.
But they're good at this.
Yeah, exactly. There are like fang makers who go to events and things, but they usually build something that you put in like temporarily. It's like a little like wire behind the teeth sort of bridge set up.
Do some of these mortal blood drinkers play the game of they don't go out in the sun either or anything like that?
Oh, sure. And
really?
Someone will tell you that was one of the first symptoms to manifest from a young age. But usually when they're studied or their blood is analyzed, they'll find that there's really no underlying physiological cause. I do believe in most cases it's psychological. But, you know, it's interesting. If people believe something enough and stick to it enough, they create their own sort of mini-reality, their own thought form. And a lot of what I found in the occult is you can very much create your own reality. So even though these kids aren't going to live forever or probably fly anytime soon, they may start to experience certain phenomenon that will make them believe that maybe something deeper is going on. And it is all self-induced, and it doesn't have to be self-induced in the guise of vampirism, but it happens.
And do they act this way all the time, 24/7, or are there moments where they become relatively normal people? And you can't even tell the difference who they are.
Well, I mean, with some of them, it's a matter of survival. If they have like a normal kind of desk job or something.
So some of them do?
Yeah, they have to.
We could be working next to these vampires and not even know what you're saying.
Exactly. You know, they'll look all normal during the day, and then at night they'll go out and act their fantasies, which I guess just about everyone does in some form or other.
They find the right places, the right clubs, I guess, to do this?
Yeah, exactly. Safety numbers. They find places where people of like minds get together and they share their ideas and their actions.
All right, stay with us, Konstantinos. When we come back, we'll talk about speaking with the dead. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Konstantinos' website, Konstantinos.com. That's with a K. It's linked up at coasttocoastam.com right now. Next hour, I'm going to devote the entire hour to speaking with him about summoning up spirits and the Ouija board. And when we come back, we'll talk about speaking with the dead on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. We're with our special guest tonight, Konstantinos, speaking with the dead. So you've done a lot of work in this area, a lot of work. Is it because of technology that has made this so easy now?
It really has. I mean, it's been getting easier. And you'll see it appear more and more in even TV shows now because it is so easy to get results, especially if you have an environment to practice in that is conducive, let's say a so-called haunted house or a place that's full of activity.
If we ever get our sci-fi show back and off the ground, I want to have you on it with us, because I think you'd offer some incredible insight. Your new book, Speak with the Dead, you point out 7 methods for spirit communication. Let's go through some of those if we can. 7 methods.
Okay, a few of them are sort of elaborations on the same idea, the recording of voices. And electronic voice phenomenon, I mean, everyone's seen it by now. It's the idea that the dead can influence magnetic media or other kinds of media to imprint voices. So in the book, I go through the methods for just capturing voices from the air without anything but a recorder. Then we move into using white noise, which there was a movie I was seeing.
Oh, yeah. Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
Did you like that movie?
It was,
Hollywood, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it sort of went way off there, and I mean, I guess there would have even been better ways to do that, but it was fun. I mean, you can almost watch Michael Keaton on the interviews for that, not seem that into it after, like, day one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the idea is still there that using some kind of material, like white noise or static, it makes it easier to manipulate and create voices. But lately, more and more people have just been experimenting with pure recording with high-quality gear, like either a hard drive or a digital recorder. There's no interference, no hissing that's not conducive to detecting voices. And once you capture something now, it's becoming easier. As you mentioned technology, it's easier now to grab the waveform on a computer and amplify just a specific area using something like Cool Edit Pro or other widely available software.
Right.
And then you could just bring it out and hear it and slow it down and speed it up. And sometimes changing the speed makes it easier to recognize if it's a guy or girl or maybe even someone you know.
If you get a moment while you're chatting with us tonight, to get up to the coasttocoastam.com website, take a look at the feature email that was sent in by one of our listeners. Give me your impression, if you can, on that photograph of what looks like an angel floating on the water. And, you know, a lot of things we can do with, Photoshop and things, but this one's pretty eerie. And, I'm not so sure that that's a doctored picture. That might be the real deal. But I want to get you...
it right now.
Okay, do you see it right there on the homepage?
Yeah, let's see.
Isn't that weird?
It's definitely hard to tell. I mean, that's...
It's a good one, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, the source... The size of the source material is not quite big enough to be able to...
Well, you can click that. It'll open it up for you.
No, I did. Yeah,
okay.
I brought it up. I'm looking at it in high resolution. It's possible. I've definitely seen stranger.
Yeah. Why are they captured? Those that are real, those that are out there, these images, why are they captured on film or digital? I mean...
it's basically just another form of emulsion, another form of getting an energy form onto something that captures it. I mean, using photographic plates to capture energy is a very old practice. I mean, it's still used in some form when you're doing quantum mechanics experiments. If you want to try and understand particle behavior, you'll still use essentially a glorified photo plate to capture something that's normally invisible. So if you want to talk about the type of energy that's easily manipulated, very subtle energy can be easily recorded onto film more easily than it could be detected with the human eye.
Yeah, I was going to say, because very rarely do people ever see anything, but as soon as they go back and look at their film or look at the digital, there it is.
Yeah, it's the idea that a lot of phenomena are based on the idea that the energy's there and these sort of signals are there, but we're not really able to tune into them all the time. We're in so-called daytime consciousness too often. We're focusing on work or whatever, and we sort of shut down those parts of our mind that could be tuning in. That's sort of how the Ouija board works, really. I mean, you can think of the Ouija board as like, let's say it's drizzling all over your town. That water won't really do much, but if you had a giant funnel and you tuned it all in like a laser beam, it would blast a hole through the ground. That's sort of how a Ouija board works.
Yeah, we'll get your take on that next hour, and I'm looking forward to that. Now, the EVPs, those sounds, some people have said, Konstantinos, that really what these are sounds coming from another dimension. I tend to think it's a ghostly sound on some kind of entity that is still here that hasn't moved on. What's your take?
It could be from another dimension, but it's defined dimension, right? Like some people's theories of the afterlife are that it's just another dimension.
True.
There's the idea of just multiple possibilities, parallel universes. In science, there's the principle where if you don't necessarily observe something, it exists in multiple states of probability. So if there's multiple parallel universes like that, sure, we could be picking up those voices. We could even be picking up people who recently died here, but maybe didn't die in one of those parallel universes. It's certainly possible.
Are the voices always out there? We just haven't heard them, or we haven't recorded them, or do they pop up when they are asked to?
I've definitely found that the experimenter affects the experiment when it comes to EVP, just like a lot of other bizarre phenomena. If you have this sincere intent to try and capture these voices, they do seem to manifest. Now, is that truly a supernatural thing? Not necessarily. That happens in even simple particle physics experiments. The experimenter wanting a particle to go one way or another can make it go that way. So there's definitely something going on there with our intent sort of reaching out and meeting these other minds and getting them to respond.
Must the person have died in that location for that entity to appear as an EVP, or are they just scattered all over the place?
Yeah, I've seen results at graveyards. I've seen results just with an item that belonged to the person. I've seen results with just a photo, which leads me to believe it might have a lot to do with the mind of the experimenter. You sort of tune in and use that as like a focusing point, something to reach out with.
I was going to say that with so many billions of people who have died over the eons, why aren't we having sound clutter, with voices everywhere, stepping on each other? You could barely understand them because they're all talking.
Well, I think they would be broadcasting using a part of the electromagnetic spectrum that normal radio doesn't pick up, normal TV doesn't pick up. And I think our minds are more finely tuned, and they can, through something like a photograph or a place or a piece of clothing or something, reach out and try and connect and make that link. I definitely don't think they follow the normal laws of, the FCC's regulation on broadband.
Yeah, exactly. Another way, of course, to try to contact the dead is telepathy.
Yes, definitely. And some people who start with electronic voice phenomena, and there's a reason I put those methods in that order in the book. If people start with trying to record voices, then they eventually find that they don't really need the tape recorder. Or sometimes they'll be recording and they'll just know what it's going to say, and they play it back, and sure enough, it's there. But they didn't hear it. They just sort of knew it was there. And after a while, sometimes people find that they can actually get the impressions, sometimes clear words or pictures. But they're usually not 100%. Sometimes they won't come at all, and sometimes the impressions will be there. They very rarely seem to come to perform for, like a television studio or something.
What freaks me out is when I always hear the sounds of children. Not that it scares me, it's just freaky. It's sad.
It certainly is. It's a very distressing thing to hear. And sometimes, I don't know if this will bring much comfort, but sometimes it's because the voice is just incredibly warbled or moving quicker. So sometimes if you play around with the speed, you see it might sound more like someone a little older. But yeah, certainly when it sounds like a clear child voice, it's a little freaky.
Seances, you a believer in that?
Yeah. It's one of those things that has been manipulated. Houdini had a great time exposing the tricksters years ago. Because a seance is a perfect place to do some fraud, right? It's a dark room. You're all sort of sitting around a table. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes, behind the curtains? But seances are also a great example of a bunch of people focusing on one thing and trying to tune into one thing. And one thing I've seen time and time again is that whenever an experiment occurs with a bunch of people involved, it's not just doubled or tripled if there are 2 or 3 people. It's more like quadrupled or maybe 10 times as strong. It's like an exponential increase.
How important is the medium?
I think the medium's important. Sometimes the medium's important just as a psychodramatic figure, someone who, if they have the right demeanor and seem to exude the right authority, other people in the room will focus better. They'll tune in better. But sometimes the medium's also the one who can do something with all that gathered intensity. The one person in the room who can pick up that weak signal that comes in.
When you, and I'm sure you've been to a seance or two, do you look around to see if they're, setting up things or if they've got speakers under the table?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a trained stage magician and mentalist, not because I put on shows in Vegas.
You are Chris Angel, aren't you?
No. But I learned pretty much the same stuff for a different reason. I like to be able to debunk. I definitely don't ever want to be taken, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, if I'm going to study this and look for the truth, the last thing I want is to waste my time with a trickster.
Have you caught some of them in the act?
I've seen it, and I've seen it in high-profile events where I really can't say anything for litigious reasons.
Until later, I guess, or...
Yeah, totally. Some of the people who have the most popular names in the field are definitely not legit.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just put this out there. If you were going to film an 8-minute segment where you're supposedly talking to someone's deceased loved ones, and it takes 45 minutes to film that 8-minute segment, what does that tell you?
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever heard of any situations where the individual is so obsessed with contacting their beloved one that they will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with a medium to do this? I mean, do they get taken that way too?
Oh, sure. And the worst is when the person is sort of high profile and they don't realize that finding out information about them is way too easy. I mean, in that case, a medium wouldn't even have to, or a fake medium, wouldn't even have to resort to something like cold reading, which cold reading is, of course, now the new...
what is that?
The new seance, made for the TV age. It's where you literally pump for information and do so in a way that the person being read only remembers the hits and not the negatives.
Interesting. How can you give me an example on that?
Well, one good way to do it is if you're in the same room as the person, you can read their body language, see how they respond to certain cues.
And the person being the person who's trying to look for their departed one.
Sure.
Okay.
And I mean, if they're particularly distressed, it's extremely easy because they want it to work so bad.
Yes, they do.
They're not even going to try and be skeptical. And usually what they'll do is, I mean, and this is an old mentalist technique. It used to be done in fake psychic shows on stage. What you would do is you would use a lot of positive reinforcement words. All you remember was that a lot of positive words were said. And people in the audience sometimes will remember it all as being positive. For example, if you keep saying, yes, yes, do you understand this? Does this make sense to you? Yes, yes. If you keep throwing all the yeses out there, the only thing the audience remembers hearing is yes.
Yes, yes, yeah. This guy's good.
Yeah, he was never wrong. Even if the person's like flinching or,
Yet during some of these hoaxes or frauds, it is real in some cases, isn't it?
It could be. It's a funny thing about acting. It's just like before when we were talking about vampires. If someone acts something and pretends it enough, every once in a while a real glimpse will come through. What I think is interesting is I'm sort of wondering if some of these people think that they're not using cold reading. And every once in a while, they do actually get something real, and it just reinforces it.
And they luck out, basically.
Exactly. But from what I've seen, I don't think the dead come 100% on demand.
But you do believe the dead is out there?
Yeah. And again, it might not necessarily be for the explanation that we want it to be. It might not be that they're exactly in the heaven we're visualizing, and we can reach out to them forever and ever. It might be, parallel universe theory like we talked about. It might just be a recorded sort of emanation. Or it could be, I mean, this is a stretch, but it could be our own latent psychokinetic ability imprinting their voices on a tape. But that would be the ultimate wish fulfillment, right? I mean...
I have had people, Konstantinos, call this program saying that they have received telephone calls from their dearly departed, and the caller ID will be very strange. I mean, all ones, for example. It's just weird. What's going on there?
I've seen that phenomenon. It's been around a long time, and it's yet another electromagnetic emanation. Anything like this really loves electronics. Any kind of phenomenon like this definitely manifests electronically. It's pretty much the same as a tape recording. Sometimes it's solicited. Sometimes you literally ask, and you get this kind of phone call. If you think about it, the mechanism for making a phone ring is a lot simpler than recording a minute of audio. We will, in your last hour with us, the third hour, open up the phone lines, and you may get some incredible calls from people who've had their loved ones call like that. I remember one where a person, their grandmother called after they had died. They didn't know it, of course, the individual, and then he gets a call from his mother and says, your grandmother died, and he'd already talked with her. I mean, it's really weird things like that. Yeah, I've definitely seen that. The immediate sort of distress apparition phenomenon comes through in phones and dreams and other things. What about the computer age now? Does that have anything to do with this? Yeah, it's the same kind of technology being used. People are trying to capture everything from text to images right on their computer from the other side.
Marshaled all their friends from Europe, certainly all over North America, Latin America, Australia, and they started doing a TV series based on Star Trek. They got permission from CBS. And the amazing thing is that they're all independently successful in each their own careers. For example, the young actor that plays Sulu as a young man is a hotshot Washington, D.C. attorney. The actor that plays Dr. McCoy is, in fact, a real doctor in Portland, Oregon. And the spearhead of the whole project, James Cawley, is a very successful Elvis impersonator. I love it. George, when you first got the original part of Mr. Sulu in the original television series, how did that all come about? Tell me about the audition, how you knew it was happening. This is something I think everyone would love to know. Well, it wasn't anything too unusual. My agent called and said he had an interview for me at Desilu Studios. A man named Gene Roddenberry, who I didn't know from Adam. I went to the interview, and you're a little nervous when you're going into an interview. I mispronounced his name. I called him Mr. Rosenberry, and he, in turn, also made a mistake in pronouncing my name. He called me George Takei, and I told him, well, that's not the way you pronounce my name, but I have no objections to that pronunciation of my name because there is a legitimate Japanese word that's pronounced Takai, and it translates into English as expensive. But my name is pronounced Takei, and no producer likes to call an actor expensive. So he said, oh, my goodness, yes, you are Takei. And I told him, well, Takei doesn't mean cheap either. And that was how this whole thing began for me. Did you expect the series to run as long as it did, and also to have the kind of fan base that it developed? Well, I could tell you that because I fancy myself a visionary, I expected it to go on, and here in the 7th year of the 21st century, I'd still be talking to you about Star Trek. No, I did not. As a matter of fact, the series was very low rated, all 3 seasons that we were on, and finally, despite the fact that at the beginning of each episode we announced that we were on a 5-year mission, our 5-year mission was summer during the conflict but had avoided doing so. This is an interesting twist to the Iraqi war. Fed up with being part of a group that cuts off a person's face with piano wire to teach others a lesson, or cooks children
dozens of low-level members of al-Qaeda in Iraq are daring to become informants for the U.S. military in a hostile Baghdad neighborhood. The groundbreaking move in Dora is part of a wider trend that has started in other al-Qaeda hotspots across the country, and in which Sunni insurgent groups and tribal sheiks have stood together with the coalition against the extremist movements. Interesting twist there. In England, servicemen and firefighters are battling to protect the electricity supplies to 500,000 people as the highest floodwaters in memory continue to rise. The government announced an independent inquiry as water levels in the Thames and the Severn exceeded those of the devastating floods of 1947 and were forecast to rise 20 feet higher than normal. More than 10,000 families have been left homeless in the western part of the country and the Thames Valley over the past 4 days. Electricity supplies to 50,000 homes have been cut, 150,000 homes left without water. The floodwaters continue to increase in the United Kingdom. In Deerfield, Florida, a 36-year-old diver was killed after lightning struck his oxygen tank. He and his friends were diving near a boat in the Deerfield Beach. When he surfaced, lightning struck his tank. He was pronounced dead on his way to the hospital. Now, Richard C. Hoagland has sent me an email, and then he pointed out a story that I knew about because this happened in St. Louis over the weekend. And he said, George, I think something's happening because of your Ouija board show, the show that we're going to do on Wednesday. And you know what? Richard might be right. And I want to tell you some of the things that have been happening. There's no question in my mind that, again, the Ouija board is a toy, and it's the individual that lets in any of these spirits, these bad spirits. But something is happening to people I know and people who have been associated with this show very recently. And I want to just go through this very quickly for you. First of all, over the weekend, hundreds of people were trapped inside the Gateway Arch. That's the big arch in St. Louis. I know that well. I've been up it before. The arch goes 630 feet up in the air. It's huge. Some people were stuck in there for 3 hours with an electrical failure. And it's weird that it would happen in St. Louis, my hometown there. My daughter calls me this morning. Her dishwasher blows up, flood in her kitchen. Accidents reported, and Archbishop James Long was on the program last week, who warned about the Ouija board show. His family has been involved in a critical car accident, and he's going to come on the program briefly Wednesday to talk a little bit more about that. I am beginning to think twice about this program, which is still scheduled, and we will still go on with it. But I've got to tell you, I am really thinking twice that friends and people I know are getting affected, and I'm also concerned about you. If you go up to the coasttocoastam.com website, take a look at the listener's email photograph, an unbelievable picture of what could very well be an angel on the water. It's shot by a fellow by the name of Ron. We won't give out his last name, but go take a look at that picture. And also, well, the time has come. Our dear friend Mark Zachary recently co-wrote and directed an upcoming Star Trek New Voyages episode called World Enough and Time, starring Star Trek alum George Takei. And both of them are next on Coast to Coast AM. And also, we'll take your phone calls with both of them later on this hour. This will be a real treat for you. And then I've got a little surprise, a promise I made on the air a few months ago to an individual. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, here's a real treat for those of you who are Star Trek fans, and, of course, you listen to Coast on a regular basis. Of course, you know Mark Zachary. He's been on the program before. He's got more than 100 dramatic television credits to his name, including episodes of Star Trek, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Babylon 5, of course, Twilight Zone, Sliders. Mark has served on staff of 4 series, which include Sliders, Lazarus Man, Beyond Reality, Friday the 13th, the series. Beyond this, he's written 7 pilots, and Mark has been a commentator for 3 years on NPR's Morning Edition. He's also the author of the best-selling The Twilight Zone Companion and has written for virtually every major studio and network, and his work has been nominated for several awards. Mark Zicree. Hey, Mark, how are you?
Very well, George.
Okay, and we've got a great surprise here. George Takei, best known for his portrayal of Mr. Sulu in the acclaimed television film series Star Trek, has more than 30 feature films and hundreds of television guest starring roles to his credit, currently appearing as a recurring character on NBC's TV Heroes. We'll talk with him a little bit about that. In that, he's the father of a time traveler. George's acting career has spanned 5 decades, and he's grateful. From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to Coast AM. Next hour, vampires, demons, and communication with the dead with author Konstantinos. I'm looking forward to this one. Well, here's some important news you need to know. The government warning all of us now and retailers to take urgent, and they mean urgent, action to rid your shelves of more than 90 different products, from chili sauce to corned beef hash to some dog food produced at a plant linked to a botulism outbreak. My gosh. Castleberry's Food Company, that's the name of the company. They have closed their suspected plant. Tens of millions of cans that may have been involved, according to the FDA. The company has also hired an outside firm to visit more than 8,500 retailers all around the country in an effort to quickly get recalled products off of store shelves. So far, 4 cases of botulism have been reported, 2 from Indiana, 2 from Texas. All 4 people consumed hot dog chili sauce original, which is a product made by Castleberry's. Botulism is a rare but serious illness caused by consuming foods with the toxin, a nerve toxin that can cause paralysis of the arms, breathing muscles, and legs, symptoms such as blurred vision, slurred speech. It'll hit you generally within 18 to 36 hours. Castleberry Food Company. Look on those cans. Drinking just 1 soft drink a day, whether diet or regular, may boost your risk of getting heart disease, according to a new study. That's because they say a soda habit increases the risk of developing a condition called metabolic syndrome, according to the new research, and that in turn boosts the chance of getting both heart disease and diabetes. Michael Vick was ordered by Commissioner Roger Goodell to stay away from the Atlanta Falcons training camp until the Football League reviews the dogfighting charges against him. The NFL said that Vick would still get his preseason pay, and Goodell told the Falcons to withhold any disciplinary action of their own until the league's review completed. Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah says his group possesses an arsenal of rockets that can reach all of Israel, including Tel Aviv. Nasrallah said last year's war between Israel and Hezbollah did not succeed in diminishing his group's military capabilities. Repeating earlier claims, the Hezbollah leader said his group could already have fired at Tel Aviv last for his association with Star Trek TV's sci-fi show and the character he portrays. Originally, the helmsman of the starship USS Enterprise, Mr. Sulu, was promoted to captain of the USS Excelsior in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, released in 1991. George reprised his Captain Sulu role in a Star Trek Voyager episode titled Flashback. That was in 96. And the great part about all of this, in addition to his acting career, he gives back. He's been involved in a lot of civic affairs. George Takei. Hey, George, how are you?
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Great first name.
My whole
George.
galactic biography.
I love it. Okay, Mark, we've got you here in George. You got to tell me, how did this relationship develop to do this new Star Trek episode?
Well, I've wanted to work with George Takei for a very long time, ever since I interviewed him when I was writing The Twilight Zone Companion, because he was on one of the great classic episodes of The Twilight Zone called The Encounter. And I learned about these fans who were making their own Star Trek episodes, and the quality of them was just staggering. The effects were great, the costumes were great, the writing was very fun, very entertaining. And 30 years ago, a friend of mine came up with a Sulu story for a Star Trek show that never got made, a series called Star Trek Phase 2. And coincidentally, in that episode, Sulu ended up aging 30 years and having a family on an alien planet that he got marooned on. And it seemed the perfect time now to do this great episode.
George, I've seen a portion of the DVD. Once again, you've done a great job.
Oh, you've seen it already.
Yes, I have.
Well, this, too, is another totally undreamed of aspect of this incredible phenomenon called the Star Trek fan following. This new Star Trek New Voyages series is really a work of passion. The people who discovered Star Trek back in 1966, when they were in high school or college, went on to pursue their various independent careers and became very successful. But nevertheless, 40 years later now, there's still Star Trek fans. And when the last of the Star Trek spin-off series went off the air, Star Trek Enterprise, they didn't want to go cold turkey. So they said, well, let's do our own Star Trek series. Like, when I was a kid, we used to put on backyard plays.
Yeah.
But this time, their friends are internet friends. This 21st century device that they have, and so they